going to take you one step lower and say, what do you actually think those core courses are, and then some of the electives. So I think Steve just gave us some, and we can think about that, and then as a student, think how or what could you have gotten as a core course that could have helped you be more successful in going into a KM position, okay? And as an instructor or, you know, industry, think about what your employees or students could have gotten to make certain that they could have gotten to industry, okay?
Could I answer that, Ann?
You got 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
And before they start, can I ask a question?
We're going to allow you to answer the question, so before you start.
Okay. As I said, we've done this 13 years ago. I don't know why we're reinventing a
I
wheel.
thought I was going to talk before you start.
Oh, I'm sorry, Gior.
Not a problem.
I've known Gior since the early days, too. Him and Elsa were on the federal board for KM. I'm sorry, Gior, I got this
Not a problem.
confused. You know, Marine goes,
Yes, I understand. I would like to try to do what Steve did earlier, turn it on its head. I work as a practitioner, and I've been in the field for many years, and my agency does not recognize the need for knowledge management, although I have done it for the past 17 years. And now I'm enrolled in a research program that the agency recognized is needed, and it will lead to a degree, but in a very unusual way. And this is my question. Can you envision a KM program that does not involve any coursework? Because that's what I'm doing. I want to hear from you, and then if you want to know the details, I'll tell you later. Because I do not want to give you any kind of a hint on what can be done.
well, there's a very, we have a proverb in America that is so misleading. We say practice makes perfect. And I hear a lot of people disparaging theory. But I say theory makes perfect, practice makes permanent. You don't play golf until you learn the rules of the game. Could you imagine if Newton didn't come up with his first principles, we would probably not be flying as safely as we do today. So you need, and I don't know why people poo-poo theory, because it's only a set of relationships that are validated. It's too often why KM has a bad name is because we don't have first principles. We all have them in our head, but we don't write them down. We all learned them like Newton did from apples dropping on your head. That's how I came up with the 4 pillars. I mean, everyone contributed to those 4 pillars. I just took what you all told me was successful KM. I had about 100 on the board, and I had a group around my systems thinking, and I put them in 4 buckets. I don't care what you call the buckets, but interestingly enough, so Tibet, I don't see how you can create something without a connectivity to a principle or a foundation. You run the risk of a wild card. Now, you might succeed once in a while, but it's random. You won't succeed all the time. The problem management has, and I was just over at the school talking to the new director of education, just hired on. He came out of McKinsey and he came out of Harvard. His name is Cheyenne. And he's struggling with that same thing. What should the principles be for managing across the globe today? So, I know you, Gior. You're a gentleman. I wish you well, but I wouldn't bet on you. If you don't.
Could you ask this gentleman to please repeat the question one more time?
I'll repeat it in a second. Mike, you got tied up.
Yeah. So the bottom line is, if you're going to get into a curriculum, you've got to somehow treat in some fashion, either as a summary or an introductory course or an application course, all of the disciplines that KM deals with.
Okay. Okay. I'm going to tack yours on to the question that we're asking, which is the course set. But what he asked was, could you envision a KM program that has no courses, correct? Okay.
Thank you.
So as you're answering your question about the core courses, if you'd like to address, it from a perspective of no courses as well, then please feel free to do that. We want to start down at that end?
Yeah, let me start. It's a very interesting question. And Michael, if I might, I think I heard you say early in your career you were doing knowledge management without knowing it.
You betcha.
Okay. When I got into knowledge management, I didn't realize I was doing knowledge management. I had a particular problem, and it was an assignment, and I was given the resources and budget, and I went after the problem. And the further and further I got into it, I really enjoyed it, and we were very successful with it. And then I stumbled onto knowledge management and realized that some of the things I was doing were actually would fall under that name. Now, if I haven't lost the thought, if we were to focus on outcomes, the quickest way to end the discussion about what knowledge management is and frameworks and everything is to ask the question. I've thrown this out into the SIKM forum. What would a company be like if I walked through a company where they were knowledge aware? If I walked through the FBI, what would I expect to see people doing? What would that behavior be? And I could imagine a curriculum where it was outcome based, and we use our continuing education ideas where we let people experience creating the outcomes. Now, if you want to call it knowledge management or peanut butter or whatever you want to call it, at the end of the day, the outcome is what we're after, not what we call it. Now, if you want to back it up with science to legitimize it so it can be shared and understood in depth, I think I can understand that. But I think there's an opportunity there to create outcomes that we desire. And then the challenge is, what are the outcomes that we want? What are we really striving for? And what tools and what behavior and what mindsets do we need to be able to create those outcomes? So it's totally upside down. But one of the core curriculums for me is this organizational engineering, which is understanding how people process information and knowledge. And my particular preference is to do everything out of the box. I look at the box as an opportunity not to step in the box. It helps me define that I'm outside of the box because I understand the box. And that's my preference. So that's why I turn things upside down automatically. So that's my perspective on your question. Now let me follow through very quickly. I want to use an example of a workshop, a 3-day workshop that we run. I have a client that asked for this to be built, and it is about interviewing experts and capturing what they know in their decision-making process. And in the insurance industry right now and in the financial industries, they're automating decision-making. And some of them don't know why they're doing it, but all of their competitors are doing it. In this particular insurance company that we have as a client, they are now forced into a situation where, because everyone else, all of their competitors have automated, they feel they need to do it as well. And there's some upsides to that. So like an underwriter across the nation, they want all the thousands of underwriters to make consistent decisions. So a tool that would help them, aid them in their decision-making process, so they don't forget things and they aren't underwriting policies that they'll lose money on. So at any rate, so we designed a course. They had an expert in the company. In fact, there's 2 of them that work together as a pair. And we actually used their process on them. So in learning their process, we actually applied their process. It was very painful. I personally don't use that process. You heard me say yesterday, we teach the expert to structure the knowledge for sharing and reuse. So if we were at the FBI, we'd sit down with these 3 other senior people and we'd help them visualize and surface their domain. And then show them how that would be documented and provide the tools to do that. In this course, the very first day, the entire day is spent on getting the interviewer ready to understand themselves and how the expert thinks. So we're not talking about any knowledge management activity. We're talking about this information processing styles, appreciative communications, which is appreciative inquiry, as well as active listening. We do positive visualization. You can imagine I'm going to walk into an interview with you and I'm grumpy that day. So I want to get myself in a positive way before I go and sit down with you, and then we go through a set of body language signals. I want to make sure I'm not giving signals that's going to shut you down, and I want to be able to observe yours. This is not knowledge management. We're way out in soft skills. And then we go through a series of situational inquiries. Here's a series of open-ended questions, and what do you do when the expert responds this way? You've got a job you're after. The second day, we spend time using knowledge management tools. So how do you document this? Affinity diagrams, interdependency diagrams, decision tables, mind maps, all kinds of tools to systematically document the decision-making process. And then on the third day, you have to do the work. And in the ideal situations where we've got a whole department that's working together, they've gone through, they now understand the differences and appreciate each other's differences. Then they've learned a bunch of tools, a 12-step process, and then on the third day they have to do it.
Is this like a set of core courses and Denise's? Is that like a set, identifying core areas?
Well, it's exactly what I was suggesting with the curriculum, that you turn it upside down.
That's knowledge acquisition.
Okay.
So that's specifically knowledge acquisition.
Right.
But I'd like to just ask Steve a question. We have Richard McDermott at the World Bank right now doing exactly that. And we call that knowledge management. And Richard's teaching a course on expertise and expertise solicitation. And we call that knowledge management. So why, I'm curious, why would you say those first steps, which align exactly with Peter Senge's view of systems thinking and knowledge, why would you say that is not knowledge management?
Well, the problem...
I think it's core to knowledge management. It's absolutely critical.
The problem is so many people call everything knowledge management that it confounds the... So when I said that the core curriculum ought to be everything other than knowledge management, when I go out and reach and grab an organizational development method, I continue to call it that. When I go out and grab appreciative inquiry methods, I don't call it knowledge management because this is appreciative inquiry, this is organizational change and development. I want to keep the labels the same. When I'm actually doing knowledge transfer, explicit or tacit to explicit, that's more in line with knowledge management. So just trying to keep the things that are unique, that already exist, it's part of the intellectual property of allowing that group of people the opportunity to own that. I just want to borrow it for a while, and I don't want to relabel it.
Now, affinity diagrams are more, depending on who you talk to, affinity diagrams are part of enterprise architecture. So what I'd just like to highlight is if we could not say something is or isn't knowledge management, and maybe focus on broader.
Right.
So those are the tools being used to acquire knowledge.
Right.
That's all. That they're used.
It's back to the gentleman. I'm sorry, I remember Diora's question. I'm looking for outcomes, and the client's looking for outcomes, and they had a process that they were following that would allow a software developer to program this decision application, right? And so we're borrowing those methods, and we extracted them from their expert, who was having difficulty sharing that within his organization. He was so close to it that he was having difficulty explaining it. So we broke it down into very simple steps, built them a process. Just kind of interesting because they aren't comfortable with writing their processes down. And it's all processes. The whole company is process. The whole company is process. And they have no expertise with processes. So that was one of the things we were able to add to it. So my point was, the point I wanted to make with this was the fact that we were spending a lot of time at the very beginning thinking about people and how we're going to interact with each other to set up the situation to get the most efficient transfer of knowledge from the expert, and to make sure that the interviewer